Put yourself in position to win big on Kentucky Derby Day with the power of daily racing form. Visit shop.drf.com and get past performances, expert picks, betting strategies, clock reports, and more. Again, that's shop.drf.com.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brad Free with David Aragona. This is Derby Watch. The final Kentucky Derby prep race was run last weekend at Keeneland. It may have produced a candidate for the Preakness Stakes, and for sure it produced a points qualified candidate for the Kentucky Derby. David, now that we know who is in the Kentucky Derby field on points, take us through the one add and drop since last week.
Yeah, as you said, all the prep races are done. The points have been allotted. So this is how the field stands right now. This does represent the top 20 on points, although they're ordered in the odds order that I said here. Disarm is the addition this week. He knocks Jace's Road off the list. Jace's Road had been on the bubble with 45 points. We'll talk about some of those horses that are hoping to get into the Derby in just a little bit. So he heads over to that category. But Disarm, the 6 points that he earned for his third place finish in the Lexington do vault him into the Kentucky Derby field. And it sounds like his connections do want to run. It appears that all of the connections on this list have voiced the confirmation that their horses are going to participate in this race, with maybe Blazing Seven's the one that's slightly on the fence right now. But Brad, it sounds like this field is mostly going to hold together, barring setbacks.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I'm sure there's probably going to be a defection. Just the statistics would suggest as much over the next 2.5 weeks. Somebody's going to get sick or maybe sustain a minor injury, something that would preclude him from running in the Derby. But it looks like most of the horses on the list, as you mentioned, the exception maybe Blazing Sevens, are headed for Churchill Downs. I got to say, before we start talking about the Lexington, I just want to verbalize a concern that I have with regards to the current point system. I find it a little unusual that the runner-up from the Grade 1 Santa Anita Derby and the runner-up from the Grade 1 Arkansas Derby, and in fact, the runner-up from the Louisiana Derby, none of those horses were automatically eligible on points for the Kentucky Derby, whereas the winner of the Sunland Derby, Wild on Ice, with the 77 Beyer speed figure, all he did was, he got 50 points and he's in the field. So I wonder if maybe Churchill Downs might want to take a look at the reconfigured situation with regarding points, because I believe that a horse who finishes second in the Santa Anita Derby or Arkansas Derby or even Louisiana Derby probably carries a little bit more weight than the winner of the Sunland Derby. At any rate, we're going to talk a little bit more about Disarm and the Lexington Stakes. David, Disarm, he was runner-up in the Louisiana Derby, but he had to run back in the Lexington to earn 6 points to make himself eligible on points for the Kentucky Derby. What about the Lexington? What did you see from Disarm finishing third in this race?
I mean, I suppose there are two ways to look at Disarm's performance, and we can check out the stretch run of the Lexington Stakes, and he does finish third in here. If you just say to yourself, the connections were not looking to get a full effort out of him here, but the Derby being just 3 weeks away and trying to get that minimum good performance to get the points necessary, well, I guess they did that because he just barely held on for third in this race. However, it's not like he was a horse that had come into this race running particularly fast speed figures. His top Beyer of 90 that he got in the Louisiana Derby, he just matched that here. He was no match for the top 2 finishers. And I didn't love the way that he finished off this race, because he was being asked to finish after making a menacing run around the far turn. He just kind of stalled in the final eighth of a mile. So I don't love to see that for a horse that's going to have to go 1.25 miles in 3 weeks.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, I don't know really what to make of Disarm other than I respect his pedigree. He's lightly raced. He's in the right hands, and he's likely to improve. But I did not see a horse finishing third in the Lexington last weekend that I want to wager on in the Kentucky Derby against a much better field. So I don't know. I'm a little bit ambivalent with regards to Disarm, much like you. Let's talk briefly. Before we talk more about Disarm, I want to just briefly mention First Mission, the winner, who came through inside a tough spot through the stretch and outfinished Arabian Lion. That was a good, solid win by a lightly raced colt that I believe we're going to see in the Preakness Stakes. David, what did you think about the winner, First Mission?
Yeah, First Mission is a really nice horse. We had mentioned him on Derby Watch going all the way back to, I believe, February when he made that debut with his stablemate Bishop's Bay. Just barely lost to that, though, in a very fast maiden race at Fairgrounds, and has subsequently proven that speed figure was no fluke because he was an easy winner of his maiden race and then stepped up against this much tougher field to win the Lexington. Like you said, showed some great coming through down on the rail, switched over his left lead in mid-stretch, but then came back to his right lead late when he pulled away from Arabian Lion. So definitely a horse with upside and talent, and seems like a very intriguing fresh face for the Preakness.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I was just curious. I mean, how many horses can, win the Preakness in the fourth start of their career? And frankly, it's not that unusual. Bernardini did it back in 2006. More recently, we had Cloud Computing in 2017 and Early Voting last year. Both won the Preakness Stakes in the fourth start of their career, and that's exactly what First Mission will be trying to do, we assume. And off that 98 buyer speed figure, I think that we have to give him a big solid look regardless of how the Kentucky Derby unfolds. Okay, back to Disarm. Let's take a look at the past performances of Disarm. Look, this is a good horse with a hell of a pedigree and improving form. I just don't see anything, David, on paper that makes me want to back him or pick him to win the Kentucky Derby. What do you see with his past performances?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you. I mean, his Louisiana Derby was fine. I think we're pretty much in agreement that that was not one of the strongest 100-point preps that was run. And he just basically ran around the rail path the entire way, picked up second at the end, was finishing up decently that day, but I don't think a whole lot of the horses that were behind him in that race. And then we just talked about the Lexington, failed to take a step forward, really wasn't finishing at the end of that race. Brad, this horse was so impressive, breaking his maiden, going 7 furlongs at Saratoga last summer. I still wonder how far he really wants to go. I wonder if this might be more of a miler down the line, but the connections have the points, and it seems like most connections who have horses that have earned the points on this Derby trail do want to run the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, this is a good horse, and I'm sure we're going to hear more about Disarm as he matures and as he gains seasoning and gets a little bit faster. But as of today, right now, I don't want him on top in the Kentucky Derby. Second, third, fourth, pick up the pieces to complete a vertical exotic. That's a different conversation. But look, this is a good colt. I believe he is getting better, but I don't see, Derby winner in his future. Could be wrong. I mean, stranger things have happened. Okay, we know who the top 20 are. So let's talk briefly about a couple of horses that are first and second preference into the field. And I'm referring to Jace's Road and Skinner. They are currently ranked 21 and 22. Jace's Road needs 1 defection to move into the field. Skinner needs 2. David, I don't really know what Jace's Road, what they're thinking with this horse, and I'm not convinced that they're serious about running in the Kentucky Derby off that, retreating third place finish in the Louisiana Derby. What's your take on Jace's Road?
Yeah, I mean, I'll comment first on what you brought up earlier about the point system with Churchill Downs. I do think it needs some massaging for next year. A second place finish is just not worth nearly as much as it should be compared to a couple of fourth place finishes, which basically equal a second place finish on points in those final round preps. That just seems wrong to me. It's promoting running and not achieving results, getting into the race that way. A horse like Sun Thunder, who honestly has just finished fourth a couple times and fifth once, and he's in the Derby. It just doesn't seem fair to some horses who have done well in the final round of prep races. We'll talk about that with some others that are on the bubble. But as for Jace's Road, I mean, I agree. Didn't love the Louisiana Derby performance. I thought it was somewhat disappointing given the soft pace setup. And I mean, he earned points for the race winning the Gun Runner earlier in the year. I'm not really sure why that's a race that offers any points at all. So it just seems like an odd horse to be ranked above Skinner, who I know you also want to talk about, who just has much more speed figure power, has kept better company, just unfortunately has finished third in 2 really tough races.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Before we had to drop Jace's Road from Derby Watch last week, you had him listed at 50 to 1, which seemed like a reasonable price. Whereas Skinner, he was initially on our list, but we had to drop him to make room for some of these late points additions. Skinner, you had as a 15 to 1 contender in the Kentucky Derby field. And to me, that spells, this horse is legitimate. And I do believe he is legitimate. Maiden winner, better than luck third in the San Felipe. I thought he ran a winning race in the Santa Anita Derby. He covered more ground than the 1-2 finishers. And what I like about Skinner is this. Not only did he run well, trainer John Sheriff said when he got back to the barn, the horse was not even tired. And 9 days after Skinner's third place finish, a career best effort in the Santa Anita Derby, he was right back on the work tab on Monday morning at Santa Anita, working a half mile in 48. This is a horse that is getting better. I don't know if he's good enough to win the Kentucky Derby, but I do hope he gets in and at least has a chance to do so. These two horses, 21 and 22, Jason's Road and Skinner. Skinner to me is a serious player in the Derby if he makes the race. What about you?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, just from a speed figure standpoint, there are some horses who have guaranteed their spots in the Derby who have never run Beyers above 90. And Skinner, his last 3 Beyer speed figures are all 94 and above. He has one of the highest Beyer speed figures of anybody in this field for the Santa Anita Derby last time. And I know speed figures aren't everything. I'm not saying that the Kentucky Derby field should be decided based on speed figures, but like you said, he would be a legitimate player in this race, a horse that would pull some real support. And for a race like the Kentucky Derby, you do want to see the strongest possible field assembled, and Skinner would be part of that cast. So I do hope that he can get in, being number 22 on the list. History would say he still has a pretty good shot of getting into the race. So we'll see how that develops.
Yeah, I agree. He's a player. And like you said, David, the objective is to get the best field into the gate. Skinner, unfortunately, right now is on the outside looking in. And to me, he's no worse than a top 10 contender. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the horses that are on the bubble, including the 2 that we're looking at right now. We've talked about Jason's Road and Skinner. Cyclone Mischief, whether you like him or not, I think you have to at least acknowledge that he ran fairly well in the Florida Derby. He ran third also in the Fountain of Youth before that. He's with 45 points, but he's ranked third on the AE list due to earnings in non-restricted stakes races. Major Dude, I'm surprised that they're still talking about a dirt race with Major Dude, who strikes me as a synthetic or grass type horse. Mandarin Hero, runner-up in the Santa Anita Derby, a surprising runner-up in the Santa Anita Derby. And who knows, if Practical Move doesn't drift 2 paths off the rail through the stretch, maybe Mandarin Hero drops his nose down in front. Who knows? King Russell, we mentioned him earlier, runner-up in the Arkansas Derby, but he's ranked way down the list. So there's some good horses on this bubble-type list, including my favorite, Skinner. David, anything you want to add with regards to the on-the-bubble listees?
Yeah, just to kind of drive the point home, I mean, the 3 horses at the bottom of this list, Major Dude, Mandarin Hero, and King Russell, I mean, say what you will about their merits. I think most people would agree Mandarin Hero would be the strongest contender out of that group, but these horses were second in final round preps. They should be in the Derby. I think that's fairly clear, and I hope that they revise that point system next year to satisfy that. But as for this group, I agree with most of what you said, Brad. I think Cyclo Mischief is a nice horse. I don't know if the Derby is the best race for him because I'm not sure he wants to go 1.25 miles, but he ran better than it might look against the flow in both the Fountain of Youth and the Florida Derby. Major Dude, I'm kind of on the same page with you. He's a nice turf synthetic horse. We'll see if he can switch back over to dirt. I'm certainly skeptical. And Mandarin Hero, you kind of put him in the same category as Skinner as one of the fastest horses in the race based on his last Beyer. He's going to need a few more defections to get in than Skinner does. He's a little more of a long shot to make the race at this point, but who knows? And we've seen years where there are a lot of defections in the final 2 weeks leading up to the Kentucky Derby. So I would hope he can get in, but if not, it sounds like his connections might stay in the U.S. to target the Preakness.
That's exactly right with Mandarin Hero. And by the way, Churchill Downs allows 24 horses to be entered in the Kentucky Derby. So 20 in the body of the field, 4 on the also eligible list. And we only have to go back 1 year when Rich Strike drew in from the AE list and sprang an upset at odds of 80-1. So there's going to be some changes, we believe, over the next week or 2. And David and I will talk about them on Derby Watch next week. For David Aragona, I'm Brad Fried, and we'll see you next time.